Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command.
The Cardiac Commanders are the Clutch Commanders!
With former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome into Take Command alongside former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen. I'm Grant Paulsen. We are getting you ready for a matchup with the Los Angeles Chargers Sunday on the road at 425 in LA. The Chargers are 3-1. They started the season 3-0. They were one of the real surprise teams of the National Football League through 3 weeks, and then they stubbed their toe with a loss against the New York Giants. They also, speaking of losses, lost one of their top players, their all-pro caliber tackle, Joe Alt. So that means they're without both of their premium tackles on both sides of the line of scrimmage now moving forward. We've got all kinds of thoughts on this game. You can watch us on the 106.7 The Fan and Team 980 YouTube streams. Of course, download, subscribe, rate, review to this podcast wherever you get your audio. Logan, the boys are going out to SoFi to play in a $5 billion stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally excited to kind of check that stadium out. That obviously didn't exist when I was playing. They were just kind of starting talks to get that done. I think I played there with Houston in 2019, and they were still playing at like some soccer field. So I'm really excited to check out the stadium. Excited to get back to LA, but I think this game, the dynamics of this game have changed pretty dramatically with that Joe Alt injury. Obviously, Mekhi Becton's also banged up, and you mentioned Rashawn Slater's out. And so if we're going to start with the defense, I think that to me is maybe the storyline of the game is how, if you're the Chargers, do you insulate the offensive line? And if you're Joe Wood Jr., how do you attack that group? I think one of the talking points coming out of the Atlanta game, coming out of the Green Bay game, is the defense has struggled when they haven't been able to create consistent pressure. And I think this is a great opportunity, especially after watching that Giants game, to kind of get after a bunch of guys who are backup offensive linemen. And, the offensive line, this is, again, more of a philosophical thing. Offensive line don't develop, and you can't hide them the same way you can hide other positions on the field. So can Joe Wood Jr. capitalize?
Yeah, Joe Alt is the big injury with the high ankle sprain, but Mekhi Becton, their right guard, has been dealing with injury. Will Dissly, who's one of their tight ends, came over from Seattle, has also been battling injury. I will say, in terms of the skill positions, this is a good-looking group that they've put together. Justin Herbert was playing at an MVP level before this past week. He's getting pressured a lot. We'll talk about that. But Quentin Johnston has really come on, a wide receiver who they drafted in the first round who had been a big disappointment. Ladd McConkey was a early round pick last year who put up 1,100 yards, had a fantastic season for them, and is a future star, may already be a star, a Pro Bowl caliber talent. And they brought Keenan Allen back, who looked like he didn't have a whole lot left, kind of had a year where people were asking if he was washed in Chicago a season ago. And you fast forward, and now Keenan Allen is kind of back to his old ways as a third down war daddy and red zone threat catching touchdowns. In the backfield, I know they've suffered a season-ending injury already with Najee Harris, their running back, but their starter is getting more work, and it's kind of worked out because he's just more explosive and better, is Amarian Hampton, their first-round pick this year out of UNC. So there's a lot to like about their skill group, and this is a real challenge for Joe Witt.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I'm really glad you brought up the skill position group because it's like the polar opposite of the offensive line. Like the offensive line we just talked about, it's really banged up. But I do think you see Quentin Johnston, and he's 6'3", 215. He can run, he can jump. He's, I think he's leading the NFL in explosive touchdown receptions. And when you watch the film, like, he jumps off the page. He's not, kind of this overly nuanced route runner or, overly technical when it comes to stems or things like that. But he has the horsepower to get up, get going, get down the field. And then, the big knock against him was that he had one of the highest drop rates in the NFL, in his first 2 years in the league. And then all of a sudden that's kind of normalized and gotten back to average. And he's made some really nice plays down the football field. And to me, his emergence is the thing that kind of makes the offense go in terms of vertical passing attack. You mentioned Keenan Allen, dude, I mean, he reminds me a little bit of like Zach Ertz and his ability to kind of just play like old man basketball at the YMCA. Like, here's a zone, let me post up. And him and Herbert just have kind of this clairvoyant connection, almost like Mahomes and Kelsey, like kind of when they're really rolling. So on third down, like, you got to identify where 13's at all times because he knows how to deal now. He knows how to deal in a big way. And then McConkey's had a slow start. I think he's only had 17 catches this year. His target share's down quite a bit because, Quentin Johnston's playing better. Keenan Allen's playing better. But Lad's a 4.3 guy. He's like a 41-inch vertical guy. Like he's like looks like this little skinny white kid, but his measurables are very similar to like Garrett Wilson for the Jets. So he can absolutely scoot. He's much more technical as a route runner than Quentin Johnson. Kind of coming along as a playmaker. And then you got a Rondé Gadsden, the tight end from Syracuse, 5th-round pick, who is a converted wide receiver in college and kind of provides another foil to Keenan Allen in terms of underneath target share. I want to say it was the Broncos game. He was really excellent in that game, kind of underneath stuff, digs over the middle of the field, one-on-one isolations with corners and safeties, and he was able to win those matchups. He's a big guy, 6'6". He's got long arms, 34 inches. So they've got a bunch of playmakers, and we haven't even talked about the running game. Amari Hampton, he has been very quiet through the first probably 3 weeks of the season, but against New York, man, he was a 2nd-round pick, and every ounce of talent that man has was on display. Like, he is fast, he is big, he is physical, he is downhill. He is a dangerous playmaker. However, there's not a lot of air in the run game. And so they've been able to kind of bottle him up over the first couple of weeks. He did have a couple of explosive runs against the Giants, but don't make no mistake, this is a dangerous playmaking group. And then you look at Justin Herbert, Grant, and I am hard-pressed to find somebody who's playing better football than him right now. I mean, he is absolutely dealing. Like, I know he didn't play his best game against the Giants, but Grant, like, he's got this little stutter go that he throws to Quentin Johnson. The safety is on the hash, so he's not even in the middle of the field. He's on the hash. It's man coverage. The guy's in trail technique. The safety's playing over the top. He delivers a frozen rope go ball between those two players to Quentin Johnson that I mean, that's probably the best throw I've seen all year so far. So, like, just the velocity, the turnover, his athleticism, his playmaking ability, like, to me, over the first couple of weeks of the season, he's the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL. So, and I'm not being hyperbolic there. Like, that's the kind of playmaker you're dealing with.
You have Josh Allen ahead of him probably, and who else?
Josh Allen, and then I had somebody else. It's close. Like, I was trying to think because I don't think Lamar's playing that well right now. I mean,
no,
I think Lamar's
Baker, maybe.
Maybe Baker. Matthew Stafford was the other one that I had.
Oh, Stafford's been ridiculous. Yeah. No,
so,
it makes sense. I mean, I thought through 3 weeks, I was talking about this last week before this Giants game, and it's not like Herbert played terribly, to your point. They lost, and it was ugly all the way around. But I thought he was maybe right there with Allen in terms of the MVP conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're at that level, like, yeah, it's elite, really good stuff. I just watched that play you're talking about, and, I mean, it's hard to make that throw. But his arm talent is as good as there is in the NFL, and he's an unbelievable athlete. And I think what you could see starting this weekend, but certainly moving forward, he might have to move around a little more. And I'm talking about scramble, get away from pressure, because you're right. If he just sits back there and makes throws, which they were able to do for the first month of the year for the most part, well, he'll chew you up. Quentin Johnston, to go back to him for a second, in his first 32 games in the NFL, he had 70 or more yards 3 times. I mean, he was on his way to being a significant bust. He's now done that in 4 consecutive games to start the year. He's getting a 25% target share, which is huge, 38% air yard share, which is massive, meaning the passing game's kind of going through him, oddly enough. And if you look at his last 5 regular season games dating back to last year, it's targets of 13, 9, 7, 7, and 14, catches of 8, 6, 3, 5, and 13, 98, 89, 71, 79, 186 yards, and in that time, 4 touchdowns in 5 games. So, I mean, he's become a heavily utilized, legitimate weapon. We'll get back to Herbert in a second, but in terms of defending him, I don't think we're in a place here where Washington is going to be, traveling anybody with him or anything. But how would you, what's your game plan there for trying to make sure that you don't let him take the lid off down the field?
So that's a really good question, because you look at in the Atlanta game, not to kind of beat a dead horse with that game, but I thought there was a little bit more. There was a little bit more of a conscientiousness, a conservative element to how Joe Witt called the game, and I think it stung a little bit at times, right? So what I would say is, is there a way where they can play a little bit more aggressive man coverage, because that's what they did in training camp, aggressive man coverage, and get home with 5. Like that, I think, is really got to be the game plan. So it's not so much the coverage element; it's, to me, the rush. Can we rush Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, get those guys downhill? Dorrance Armstrong's done a great job, and again, I do think Joe Wood Jr. has some type of line that he's kind of waiting for in terms of 3rd down. But I'd say, man, just be aggressive. They're going to get some shots, but one of the things about this defense when Dan Quinn is running it in Dallas is they're kind of encouraging high variance, right? You will give up an explosive play, but you'll also get a turnover. You'll get a sack. You'll get some of these explosive defensive opportunities as well. And I think there's two ways to go about it. One is you go death by 1,000 paper cuts, which Joe Witt Jr. did a couple times last year. I think about the Cincinnati game where they kind of were in this, soft, two shell look for the majority of the game. And they just kind of we just have to bleed out slowly because our offense is playing really, really well. Or you say, hey man, let's invite as much variance as we can. Let's blitz. Let's go, the Wink Martindale way and just say, how disruptive can we be to the front? And in this game, usually I'm not a big fan of that, Grant, but in this game, I think that may be the best solution because of how disconnected that offensive line is. And people say, oh, well, like those guys are professional football players, and they are, but I want to test to see not only physically if they can handle it, because against the New York Giants, they were not able to. But I want to see mentally, can they handle it? How do we if we get in different fronts, like what are the combination calls? If we bring this pattern of a blitz, like how do they block it? So those are things that come to the forefront of mind for me in terms of I want to stress that offensive line as much as possible, as frequently as possible. And are you going to expose the secondary a little bit more? Yes, but I think that it can be a double-edged sword. They might get an explosive play, but you are also manufacturing explosive opportunities.
Yeah, just looking at some deeper numbers on Johnston in the passing game, caught 10 of 15 targets for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns against man coverage this year. If you look at it, only Puka Nacua, who's tied for the record in catches with 42 through 4 games, and Tet McMillan, the rookie from Carolina, have gained more receiving yards against man's coverage this season. Last year, Johnston really struggled in that area, has not been the case this year. So that's interesting for Joe Witt to kind of chew on and think about. Getting deeper into the offensive line and the protection. So Rashawn Slater was the all-pro left tackle that they lose in the preseason for the year. They have now tried to move on without him and replace him. They felt okay about it still having Joe Aldo as a top 10 pick, who they lose to the high ankle sprain. The guys that they've used to fill in, like Mekhi Becton at one point was helping. He's got a concussion or was dealing with a concussion in week 3, so his status is in question. But if you look at who's played at tackle other than the big boys who have gotten hurt here, it's Austin Deculus, Jamari Salyer, and Trey Pipkins. And if they had enough snaps to qualify, they would all rank in the bottom 10, in fact, the bottom 9, in pressure rate for their respective positions, according to Next Gen Stats. As a whole, the team's pressure rate has gone from 33%, which was dead middle of the NFL, 16th last year, to 43%, which is the 4th highest in the NFL this year. So for me, that's the whole name of the game. If you let Justin Herbert pick you apart, he will. You can't do that. I'm sorry. You got to make it happen.
And I think, like, you look at the second half of that, after Joe Alt goes out, after Mekhi Becton goes out in the Giants game, I mean, the pressure rate in that second half was over 50%. Over 50%, Grant. Like, that's a ridiculous number. You know what I mean? Almost 60% in terms of pressure rate. So I want to test the pipes on this, see what they do. I do think the offensive coordinator, knowing his background, obviously in San Francisco and in Baltimore, is going to try and run the football. It's just like, will they be able to, is my question. They want to be a heavy gap scheme, downhill running team, and they've done it. I will give them credit. They've done a really nice job getting to some of those runs in a creative way. They've adopted some of the, Sean McVay, let's get into 11 personnel. Let's motion the F across and have him kick out a nickel and then pull. And so we're running power, but the F is actually the fullback. They've got some of that stuff to them. But I think at their core, they're going to want to run the football to kind of slow the game down, limit the possessions. That's what Harbaugh's done throughout his career. That's what I think he feels comfortable with. But again, like, you need to have chemistry with the group up front to make that go. And if they're not connected, if they don't have chemistry, if they haven't worked together,
right,
that's still going to be very, very challenging, no matter how talented a guy like Omarion Hampton is.
Well, speaking of Hampton, another thing I really like, and you've kind of alluded to this, but I like this matchup to stop the run and to maybe be ahead of the sticks and set up some second and longs, third and longs. They got to handle them better than they did in Atlanta. They got gashed on second and long. But Hampton, behind the line of scrimmage, has been hit 59% of the time. So it's 32 of 54 carries, Logie. That's 3rd highest in the NFL this season. He does a good job breaking tackles and with some of the muddy stuff, kind of still getting a yard or two. But I mean, there's only 2 running backs who have been contacted in the backfield more often. So it's not like their offensive line issues are just pass protection. I kind of like this as a Kinlaw game, as a Payne game, as a Eddie Goldman game. Like, let's make sure we win on first down if I'm a member of that defense and earn the right to kind of get after the quarterback a little bit. But I actually think the opportunities are going to be there. I don't watch the Chargers. Last year, they were this ground and pound, hardball, kind of team I hated to watch, where it was like, oh my God, dude, you have Justin Herbert. You have all these weapons. Like, it's 2025. What are you doing? Well, they have 2020s proofed their offense to the point where, in fact, they've used, this is crazy, they've used 10 personnel. So that's like 1 running back, 0 tight ends on 34 snaps. The rest of the NFL has done it 8 times this year.
Wow.
Where they just come out and they just spread the field and they let Justin Herbert operate, in the empty gun. And so it's just a very different looking offense, but I think they know they can't run it that well. Doesn't mean you can completely avoid it, but they try to get Hampton the ball in the passing game and in other ways.
No, I think that's exactly right. And it feels different. Obviously they have like their big fullback, the Scott Matlock guy who plays defensive tackle. They've got, Will Dissly, you mentioned, who's injured, but also Tucker Fisk, who's this big, 300-pound tight end that they trot out there they have that in the bag in terms of they want to get big, they want to get nasty. I think they're like number 2 in the NFL and extra alignment on the field also. So they've got this weird swing of personnel in terms of big and physical, but also light and fast. And so I do think that's a testament, again, to the offensive coordinator in LA to kind of say, hey, we can maximize Justin Herbert. We can maximize the best player on our football team. But I do think there is this inclination from Harbaugh in general to kind of say, hey, we want to establish a run because it insulates the defense. It shortens the game. And if you're worried about being able to protect the quarterback, I think that's the direction they're going to go. But I do think like Omari and Hampton, man, last week, you're kind of like in the same way Ashton Genty was struggling, Omari and Hampton was struggling. But last week, man, he did a lot to kind of show he's 225 pounds. He's 6'2". He had a toss crack play when they were backed up, and he just absolutely outran everybody's angle to this. He is a dangerous. So it's like you said at the start of the show or start of the segment, like their ability at the receiver spot to kill you with Quentin Johnson. Amari Hampton's explosive. They've got an explosive playmaker at the tight end spot. All levels of this team can hurt you in the pass game. The weak link in the chain is the offensive line. And again, it wasn't a weak link to start the season. I mean, they had 2 guys that are going to go to the Pro Bowl probably in terms of Rashad Slater and Joe Alt, but those guys are gone. And they've got, Trey Pipkins, who has struggled in the NFL. You mentioned Austin. I can't say his name. Austin, how do you say his name? Delicus?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You crushed it the first time you said it. Anyway, but those guys have not played a lot of ball, like you said. And I want to stress those guys. I want to test those guys. And so I think
Deculus, I think it is.
Deculus, thank you. Yeah. Deculus, yeah. So, but that to me that's the story of this game. There's no other way around it. Like, you got to take advantage of that group. And to be fair, like we've seen times where coaches have come in with a good game plan and helped insulate that group. Game flow lets them insulate it. So this is another thing where it's like if the offense scores a lot of points, they got to throw the ball a ton. That group's going to be exposed big time. So complementary football definitely will help out in terms of rushing the passer. But to me, we got to take advantage of this group.
Yeah, I just think this whole plan, and Logan has said this, so I'm just doubling down basically, has to be about affecting Justin Herbert, who is playing at an all-world level, indicative of he's pushing the ball down the field. Like behind the line of scrimmage, only 10% of his throws, which is the second lowest among all quarterbacks this year. The air yards for him are number 5 in the NFL, and yet he's also 6th in completion percentage. Like, how insane is that? That's like eating fast food every day and not getting fat. Like, that's a 79% completion percentage with the top 5 air yards pushing the ball down the field. It's awesome what they've been able to do in the passing game, how they've gotten Quentin Johnston going. I think there's a lot more in the tank, as you talked about with Ladd McConkey. But I will just caution, look out for Herbert's legs scrambling at the highest rate that he has at any point during his career. 10 scramble runs into 95 yards, 4 first downs, 3 explosive gains for 10 or more yards as well. And he might turn up the faders on that just a little bit. As far as the defense goes, kind of put in the spotlight more on Washington. You mentioned the OC for the Chargers. It's Greg Roman, the former Ravens OC, with Harbaugh being the head coach, Joe Ortiz being the GM, very Baltimore-ish for them. Like they brought over a bunch of Ravens types. What is your kind of general philosophy then? You've talked a little bit about the scheme, but on some of the stories of the week, whether that's, Bobby Wagner at linebacker, Marshawn Lattimore, from a health standpoint, we don't really know if Percy Butler's back or what that looks like. They might be indoctrinating Preston Smith and Darnell Savage a little more. So how do you kind of see this thing coming together this week to have a better game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt in my mind Bobby's going to play. I think Bobby will play to the same level he was playing before. And I think, throughout the first year of this regime in Washington, they've done a good job of insulating him in coverage. And again, we talked about this on the review show. Like, you're going to see explosive opportunities, when you get matched up one-on-one with the back, like Bijan Robinson. They haven't utilized Omarion Hampton in the same way that the Atlanta Falcons use the Bijan Robinson. But if I'm Joe Wood Jr., I'm making sure we rep that look this week. We talk about solutions and we make sure that Bobby's in the best position to be successful. I talked about this with Fred. I talked about this with Santana and London Fletcher. And I think we all are kind of in agreement that, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think we're all in agreement that Marshawn's not playing badly. It's just about kind of trusting the technique, making sure the rush gets home. And again, like, the production against him has been a negative for sure. And I'm sure Marshawn would say that exact same thing. But I do think that I'm not ready to sell the farm on him yet. And so, I think he tends to match up pretty well against big, long receivers who aren't super technical at the line of scrimmage. And I think Quentin Johnston kind of fits that bill. We'll see if he can hold that standard into this game. But if you can kind of do something to eliminate the explosive plays down the field, I think that's maybe something I'm most concerned about schematically, is just the ability to communicate down the field stuff. Like, that's been an issue against Green Bay. That was kind of an issue against Atlanta. That was an issue against the Raiders. It's just making sure that we're on the same page from a coverage standpoint. We know our rules, we know our assignments, and we can mitigate the effectiveness of a guy like Quentin. How you say his name?
Quentin Johnston. Yeah.
Quentin Johnston. Yeah, I'm having like a mental stutter there. But yeah,
that's all good.
Yeah, so that's what I would say is managing the explosive plays. And again, in terms of those storylines with those specific guys, I'm not that worried about it. I think will they give up plays this week? Probably, but in terms of like their overall play, I think they're in a fine spot.
It's the most simple, here's how you win ever, right? It's all about pressure. Herbert has faced pressure 50 times over the last 2 games, 15 more than any other quarterback. So there's really no excuse, in my opinion. And this is on everybody, right? It's Witt, it's the players winning one-on-one, it's scheming it up. But twice as many pressures as he faced in the first 2 weeks of the season, coming off a game where he was pressured on 21 of 44 dropbacks. All right, that's the defensive story. Let's get to the offense next. Breaking down the Commanders and the Chargers ahead of Week 5. Huge game. Jaden Daniels likely coming back. We'll talk about that next on Take Command. With former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen, welcoming you back to Take Command. Let's get to the offense against the Chargers. So before we really start breaking down this matchup specifically, I want to dive into the conversation I haven't heard enough about this week, I think, which is this defense is a problem that's going to keep them from getting where they want to go. Last year, they were the number 5 time of possession team in the NFL. Right now, they're 28th. I think part of the problem here is that the defense might be on the field too much. And I think sometimes that's a defensive stat, Logan, where you're not getting off the field, obviously. Yeah. But one of the answers to improving the defense might be to just control the ball more and be on the field more offensively. Enter Jaden Daniels. Maybe he helps in that. Maybe you steal a few more yards on first and second down. You set up better third down situations so you're not 1 for 8 on third down like they were in Atlanta.
No, I think that's exactly right. That's something that, again, when we're talking about previewing the season, one of the things that stuck out to me was just like, if they can possess the football the way they did last year, it's going to insulate any defense that they put out there, right? And if you get, so not only are you insulating the defense in terms of their time on the field, but you're also insulating them in terms of score usually. And I think last year, if you look at it, like the offense did a great job of kind of carrying the load. They were definitely an offensive-driven football team. So if you can possess the football more, stay on the field longer, it stresses the opponent's offensive coordinator. And it's not stressing them from a, like the score is, 7-10. It's just stressing them because you can see offensive coordinators get anxious They get anxious. They think they got to press, and that definitely plays into the hands of the defense a little bit in terms of how they're calling plays. So I think if they can possess the football more, if they can get more first downs offensively, I think that's going to be a huge deal. And so, Jaden Daniels may be coming back this week, which is very exciting. And what I will say is I went back and watched all the explosive runs given up by the Chargers. And they're number 5 in terms of explosive runs given up, or number 2. So they do give up a lot of explosive runs. And I'd say over 60% of them were on scrambles. So Patrick Mahomes had a bunch, Geno Smith had a bunch, Bo Nix had a bunch, and so did Jaxson Dart. So if Jaden Daniels is back, his superpower, in my opinion, is dissecting zone. And this team does play a lot of zone and running when there's open rush lanes. And I think one of the things about Jesse Minter and this defense is they want to bring pressure, but on third down specifically, they want to bring a lot of simulated pressure. And so in that simulated pressure with the 4-man rush, if you pick it up, there's huge running lanes for the quarterback. And you've seen that over the first couple of weeks of the season. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of get back some of those offensive efficiency numbers, especially if Jaden Daniels is at 100% and playing the way we saw him play the majority of last year.
Yeah, let's talk more about this defensive scheme and some of the philosophies for Jesse Minter. He's a really interesting guy, Logan. This is someone, just if you're a football fan, Commanders fans obviously listening, but familiarize yourself with him. He's 42. He is going to be a head coach maybe next year, certainly the next couple of years. He was the DC at Michigan under Harbaugh in 22 and 23. Before that, he was a safeties coach and a coordinator at Vanderbilt. But he cut his teeth originally, came up with the Ravens as a low-ranking assistant in 2017 and 18, then as the assistant DBs coach. So there's this incestuous kind of like Ravens-Chargers thing that happens with a lot of these people with the Harbaughs and Ortiz, and they kind of are passed back and forth in a sense. But this is a rising star, and there's some principles here, a lot like when you played Green Bay, which you just were referencing, because you've got a guy that comes from the college game. And I remember talking to someone after that game, and they said, I think that you had a coordinator who's just seen a lot of what Cliff runs, and I wonder if that could happen in this game with Minter as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought that I had. And so I went back and watched the Green Bay game and kind of juxtaposed it with, what the Chargers have done so far this season. And there are a lot of similarities. Like on third down, for example, one of the pressures that they brought a ton in Green Bay was this simulated, all-out pressure, engage 8 type look, and then they drop into cover 2. And that's probably the number one pressure on third down for Jesse Minter in this defense. However, I think the one thing that sticks out to me is while their rush is good in San Diego or in LA, it's definitely not as good as what it is in Green Bay with Micah Parsons and all those tools up there that they have. And we've talked about that at length. And so there are times where you see like, hey, this is a really good disguise. They're in good position, but the rush isn't quite getting home. And it like I talked about the running lanes for the quarterback, but also they do play kind of to my surprise. For some reason, I thought they were playing more match coverage, kind of like Vic Fangio, but it is a little bit more traditional, like zone drops, like spot drops to zones. And are they matching or are they playing patterns within that zone? Absolutely. But there is a lot of grass in this defense, especially like on traditional kind of what I would call traditional zone beating concepts, like just as an example, like the old bow or pull concept where you have like a 5-yard sit by the inside receiver, the linebacker attaches, and the outside receiver just runs a dig in behind it. Like that stuff plays against this defense. Now, they're extremely well coached. They're extremely disciplined. Their landmarks are excellent. Their checks are on point. Like they're not going to give you one the same way that the Las Vegas Raiders would give you one, right? As an example, as a point of comparison. And I think that's a testament to Coach Minter and his staff in terms of how he coaches it. Like I was reading some articles about how he coaches it, and it's 3 phases of the play call, and it's modular in terms of like, hey, in nickel we can run all of our base pressures, and in base we can run all of our nickel pressures, and in penny we can run all of our nickel pressures. And so like it's the coverage is the call, the pressure is the call, the front is the call, and all of those calls are interchangeable. And you can just tell that they've banked a ton of reps with that system and that coaching verbiage because, man, they are really locked in. There's very rarely mental mistakes. There's very rarely situations where There's free runners. They're pretty assignment sound and run fits. We'll talk. That's an important thing to talk about too. They do like to play a light box quite a bit, but I do think there's space here. So if you can protect it, you're going to have opportunities to throw the football down the field, and I think that's going to be cool for this offense.
Well, if they're playing a light box so often, well, why not try to run the football and get, even out of light personnel, keep them in a light box and then just run the football at a gun more.
I think that's something I would definitely do. I will say Jaxson Dart, number 90, who's kind of been a journeyman. He was in Tennessee for a long time, is playing out of his face for whatever reason. Like, he's just been extremely disruptive on the interior. Jamar Caldwell, the rookie from Oregon, big fella. He's like 340 pounds, very, very quick for a man of that size, has been very disruptive as well. So they do rely on those guys, and those guys have played well to win one-on-ones in the interior and kind of disrupt and play a gap and a half in the same way that Vic Fangio would. Again, the coverage philosophy in the back end is different than Vic Fangio, but the box structure to me feels very, very similar. And I think those guys have played really well and allowed them to do a lot of that. And again, they are not super efficient at stopping the run. Again, they have one of the highest explosive rush rates in the NFL, but a lot of that comes from the quarterback. And I would point to those two guys. And again, the two edge players that they have, Tuilopu and Deshaun Hand, are big kind of edge setting guys, and they're really physical. And I think, again, that front does a nice job stopping the run. So, yes, you can do it. I think you should do it. I think that should be a big part of what this team wants to do and can do, and it's part of Cliff's identity, at least through the first 4 games. But again, they've built this thing with personnel in a way that allow them to play these light box structures at a high level.
Deshaun Hand, who's from Virginia, Woodbridge.
Oh,
right
really?
Here. Yeah, he went to high school in Woodbridge. He was a regional champion in wrestling in Virginia, track and field, and was like one of the bigger football stars in the area for a couple of years. But yeah, Woodbridge High School, man, he's a Viking.
Dude, look at that guy. Wow, that's impressive. Good for him, huh? Yeah, we played them the other week, yeah. That's awesome.
4th round pick in 2018. Really successful, amateur career especially, but he's turned into a decent little player. So just to back up Logan's point with a number on third downs, when you talk about light boxes or like personnel, they go dime 60Bs almost 70% of the time, according to according to NFL Pro. So that's the second highest rate in the NFL. It's early in the season. Some of this stuff is still a little bit misleading, but I think we're a quarter of the way through. Worth looking at some of those numbers. Going back though to kind of like the philosophy of trying to steal some yards against lighter boxes. Why are they so good on early downs? Their defense is giving up 4 yards per play on early downs. They've been number 2 in the NFL on first and second down. What do you see there?
Honestly, I don't have a good answer for you. I will say Diane Henley, their middle linebacker, is doing, or he's their right in there. He's their middle linebacker. Number 0. He's actually playing pretty good ball. He's fast. He's tackling well. Obviously, there's a couple of missed tackles here and there, but he's doing a good job. Troy Dye is also doing a pretty nice job. And again, they have one of the best safeties in football in Derwin James. And his ability to kind of be in the box, out of the box, kind of fit that run from depth has been a really nice he's done a really nice job. And the other thing I think that's important, and maybe this is the most important statistic, is while they do play light boxes a lot, they do pressure a lot on first down with like run stopping blitzes. So like you kind of, when you're watching film, you're like, oh, like I expect to see pressures on third down. I expect to see pressures in second and long, but here's 1st and 10, right? Let's go get this thing. And I think that's part of the reason is like they understand structurally what they look like in terms of presenting a light box. So how do you mitigate that? One is you get personnel like we talked about with Jaxson Dart and Jamar Caldwell and those guys on the interior. The other thing is let's create a little bit of movement, let's create a little bit of variance, let's create some pressures and put our linebackers in position to be free and run and make tackles. And so I think that's where I'd say too is like that's a great thing that I totally forgot about until you mentioned it, is they do understand who they are on first down. And I think they present schematic challenges that make it difficult to take advantage of that all the time.
Derwin James seems to still be playing at a high level. He's been one of the better safeties in the league for a long time.
He's a stud, man.
When you watch him, like the numbers say, wow, he's still got it. 59 coverage snaps, only 8 targets, 5 catches for sub 20 yards. What do you see? Is he still at that level?
Well, I didn't know who it was. I didn't like when I just started watching the film. I didn't know who 3 was, and I was like, "What? Like, who is this guy? He's huge. He's physical. He's downhill." And then all of a sudden, I thought he was a linebacker, like an in the box linebacker.
Well, he
And then,
comes a lot. He comes downhill a lot. I mean, 27 pressures and 7 sacks since the beginning of last season.
yeah, and so then I was like, okay, that's pretty wild. Like, and then all of a sudden he's matched up on the slot receiver for the Denver Broncos on 3rd down, and he's locking that guy up. And
Right.
I can't think of a guy who has the physicality and the downhill energy in the run game and the ability to cover a slot receiver. And Tana, I guess, watches him a lot, and Tana's like, he reminds me a little bit of Sean Taylor. And like, I can see that. Obviously, Sean is a different animal completely, but like that, the physicality to take on an offensive lineman, to physically tackle a running back, then to play in space the way he does. I didn't know he was built like that. I didn't know he could play like that. And so when Jim Harbaugh comes out and says, I think he's the best safety in football, like definitely through the first 4 weeks of the season, there's a little bit of that to his game. Like he can do anything, right? And I think you mentioned the blitzing, the run stops, the coverage skills, like it's a real deal Holyfield thing, kind of reminds me of like Jalen Ramsey when he was at the peak of his powers, kind of doing it all as a nickel. Like that's what this feels like to me.
Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen take command. All right, so then to just kind of focus internally on Washington's own guys for a second, getting Daniels back. If he's playing, I'd imagine you just call the game like you'd call the game, right? I mean, it's not like you go, all right, let's not have any design runs. Let's keep him in the pocket. I mean, if again, we don't know. Hypothetically, it's been reported since the weekend based on the Saturday workout going very well that your trajectory is he'll be back on the field. But wouldn't you think if he goes, then you just have the full allotment of whatever you want to do if you're Cliff?
Yeah, I don't know what Cliff's going to do, but I would tell you, like, I coach high school football. I've been around some really smart dudes. It is in the back of your mind, right? If a guy's got a nick, right? And you don't want to take away his superpower, but maybe I'm less likely to call like a quarterback run on, in my top 15. Like I'll call it at some point when I gotta have it when it's a big moment. But maybe I'm a little bit less trigger happy because I'm trying to protect him from himself. But if he's good to go, he's good to go, man. Like let's call the offense the way we want to call it. So maybe in the back of your mind to the slightest degree, but I do think they've been very cautious with his return to play. I think they've been rightfully so, very cautious. And it sounds like he was ready to go, or he felt he was ready to go last week. And so I'd imagine that he's going to get out there and look awesome and be himself. And so if that's the case, then everything's on the table. Let's let this thing rip.
Still not a lot of info as we record here ahead of Wednesday practice on Terry McLaurin. Sounds like John Bates will be back as well. Based on what he said on the radio on 106.7 The Fan yesterday, he's kind of trending in that way. He's hopeful that he can get back on the field against the Chargers. That would be a big deal. And then Noah Brown is the other guy on offense that we're not very sure about. Are you surprised? It's been a quiet couple of weeks for Zach Ertz. Now, I looked at it. Last year, in his first 4 games, the numbers were almost identical to this. Basically, like to the catch and to the yard. I think he has one more catch and one more yard or something like that this year than last year or vice versa. But he got on the tear as the year went on. Are teams defending him? I mean, the last time we saw him last year, NFC Championship game, he was targeted like 16 times and caught 11 balls or whatever it was. Do you think that that's been an emphasis or a focus, especially now post some receiver injuries, or is it just the way that the Reeds have taken the quarterbacks?
I think it's the way the Reeds have taken the quarterback. And again, like in the Green Bay game, I think he drew 3 pass interference calls, right? So like, even though he's getting targeted and it's not going to show up in catch numbers, like he's still a problem, man. Like no safety can cover him. You know what I'm saying? And so like when they need him, they definitely go to him. Like I think about the 3rd down that Marcus overthrew, like great route by him. Great route
was
in
awesome,
terms of creating separation and being wide open. And again, I'm sure that's one Marcus wants back, but he's still going to be a huge feature of this offense. And I think right now the driver is Debo, and I think comfortably in the Debo run game, like Debo as a receiver, obviously the 3-headed monster in the backfield. But I think when you got to have 3rd down conversions, when you need a play, it's going to be Zach Ertz. And I think you're going to see a very similar statistical pattern to his catches in terms of 3rd down, red zone, and being very productive in those areas.
If the run game's in the passenger seat and Debo's driving, then Zach Ertz is like in the middle seat, leaning up with his head
like
between the two
like,
seats.
Hey guys, like what
He's
are we
like
doing?
Talking to everybody and asking if they can go to Sheets to get some Funyuns or something like that. That's Zach Ertz, right?
Yeah, Zach Ertz is big on Funyuns, from what I understand.
I've heard
Pretty
that.
healthy.
Like,
Pretty
huge
healthy guy.
Funyuns guy.
Yeah,
for
huge
sure.
Funyuns guy.
Big Funyuns guy. All right, next we've got our picks segment brought to you by FanDuel and who's going to eat in this game. Our final thoughts as we look ahead to the Chargers on Take Command. Take Command, welcoming you back. It is the Paulsens, Logan and Grant with you. The picks segment is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. I like the Vikings minus 3.5 this week against the Browns. You got a debuting rookie quarterback in Dylan Gabriel for Cleveland against a Brian Flores coach defense.
-3?
Yeah, they're laying 3.5, so they're favored to win by, you got to win by 4 points, right? I think that makes sense on the road in Cleveland. And again, it's Flores against a debuting quarterback. So the Vikings are going to roll in this game. I think they cover 3.5, beat the Browns handily, and turn him over a few times.
Yeah. I mean, that seems, yeah. I mean, Flores makes like good quarterbacks look bad. That's a tough first start for Dylan Gabriel. Unless they think that Carson Wentz is having like some type of Carson Wentz regression after a nice first week. So
you seem surprised. Are you surprised the line's not bigger?
Yeah, I am surprised the line's not bigger. I think maybe what they're looking at there is the Cleveland defense has been amazing. And
I think
Cleveland
that's right, because the total in the game, by the way, is not only the lowest of the week. Like, you don't see totals this low in the NFL. The total is 35.5 points.
Yeah, for sure. They're banking on like a defensive battle there. But I mean, Addison's back for Minnesota. Like, they'll just fall into one maybe on accident.
That's what I think. Yeah, Jefferson catch and run, breaks a tackle, something. 49-yard, make it easy touchdown. Yeah, so Vikings covering 3.5, probably my favorite play of the week in the NFL. There you go. That is your pick segment brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. All right, Logan, some final thoughts ahead of the Chargers game, but I guess first let's start with who eats. Give me your pick to click on defense against this Chargers offense.
Well, I think you already alluded to the guys that need to eat, and it's the defensive line in general. But I would say, Dorrance Armstrong on the perimeter, taking advantage of some of those backup players, and then on the interior, I think Payne and Kinlaw. We talk about them every week, and I thought they played well last week, but I think there's some plays they would have wanted back. Can you just be consistent for the whole game and dominate the way we've seen you dominate? Lesser offensive lines like they did week 1 and like they did against Las Vegas. This feels like a game they'll be able to do that for sure.
I like Von Miller to have 2 sacks.
I like it too. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah,
I think again, like the Von Miller breakout in the division that he used to play in. We saw his eyes light up a little bit against the Raiders. Like, I could see him getting out west again and having a day.
And like you said, though, that his sacks are going to come when you are efficient on first down, right? First, second down. So can you kind of win that battle up front with those big hosses in the interior? And again, like, you got to make him uncomfortable. You got to rush with 4. We got to rush with 4 simulated pressures, and then obviously 5-man rushes. And so, however you get it done, man, that front has to eat this week if they want to win this football game. All
right, somebody on this offense has a field day, big fantasy football day. Who is it?
Gosh, man, maybe it's like I got rose-colored glasses on, but Jaden Daniels, man, I think that guy's a baller, and I think he's going to come back, and I think the way that this defense plays kind of fits him really well. I think he does great versus zone teams. They give him big running lanes. Like, it feels so different than the difficulties that the Green Bay Packers brought, for example, like the aggressive downhill nature of that defense. This feels way different than that. There's a little bit of bend but don't break to this. I think Jaden Daniels is going to absolutely crush. So
I love that call. I don't like the matchup coming back after missing 2 weeks. Like, there are 27. There's 27 defenses I'd rather him play, but you just. Last year, somewhere along the line, we said, you know what? You just bet on this kid. You know what I mean? You just feel like when he's out on the field, he's one of the best players in the league. He's going to make the big play. And boy, wouldn't that be a huge deal? Everyone's been counting down to the return. If it happens Sunday, and we think it will, maybe that puts you over the top. You get a huge win. It's interesting, though, Logan, because it's not like, I don't want to say they didn't miss him. You miss an MVP caliber, elite level QB, which is what he was last year. 12 wins, multiple wins in the postseason, onto the NFC Championship game, and he dragged you into that fight. But, this is more about the defense to me than it is. Like, Mariota played well enough to win both of those games. They averaged 33.5 when he was out. Like,
Yeah.
could he give you more TOP? Could he give you more conversions on third and just a more efficient offensive game? Sure. But I don't know if like he waves a wand over what ailed them in Atlanta, if that makes any sense.
No, I totally agree with you. I think, Mark deserves a ton of credit. Cliff called great games when Jaden was out. So this isn't like, oh no, like Jaden's back, everything's going to be fixed. I totally agree. The defense has to come out, play the way that we've talked about them playing, be aggressive. I think there's got to be a way to create pressure versus this defensive line or versus offensive line. There has to be. And if you can do that and you can make Justin Herbert not be an MVP caliber player and make him just be very good, you have a shot to win this game. And that's exactly what the Giants did last week.
Have you ever met Jim Harbaugh?
No, but I do. So I got to San Francisco in 2017, and a lot of guys, like he had just left. So a lot of guys knew him really well, and they had some amazing Jim Harbaugh stories. And obviously Trent Murphy, who I played with here in Washington, was recruited to Stanford by Jim Harbaugh. Amazing right. Jim Harbaugh stories. Like he's a character. He's a character for sure.
That's kind of my thought. For a while, I would say he rubbed me the wrong way, and I wasn't really a big fan. And he's kind of a hurricane of a human being in a lot of senses. Like he like leaves rooms just destroyed when he walks out. You know what I'm saying? But I have really grown to dig him. He is just, maybe I just get older and you kind of like the individuality or the uniqueness of people who just like, fly their I'm weird flag out there or whatever. But like, I don't know, man. He does a hell of a job everywhere he goes. I'll give him that.
Dude, have you looked at his resume? I mean, it's
insane.
Tremendous. Like he was at San Diego University or whatever he was. Win. They won. Yeah, they won. Stanford, which no one thought they could ever win there. Went to the 49ers, totally righted the ship. Michigan
got to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, Michigan was a garbage fire. Like after a slew of head coaches, he gets them back to the day. Like he is a great coach. Like say what you want about him. I know he's an odd kind of duck, but like he thinks about football all the time, 24/7, and that's what makes him good. And like that's what makes his team. And like I think the other thing too, I talked about this with Bram, is like he believes in his players. Like he comes out and says, I got to get Justin Herbert to the Hall of Fame. I think Derwin James is the best safety in football. Like whether or not that's true, the guy feels that confidence and is going to play better. And so I think it's the obsession with football, the confidence in his players, and it just works. I mean, the resume is insane. The resume is insane.
It's an all-time resume. It's really, really good. All right, Sunday, 4:25 in LA for the Commanders, trying to get to 3-2. I do think when you're 2-2 that Week 5 game, it's almost like a best-of-7 series. Man, that's a big difference. That pendulum swinging between you're through 5 with a losing record, or you're 3-2 and on the precipice maybe of being a 4-2 team. It's just a huge, huge difference. So this is a big one for the Commanders going out west here in Week 5. That'll do it for Take Command. Remember, you can watch us 106.7 The Fan, Team 980 YouTubes. Get us 3 times a week as a pod wherever you get your audio. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks for hanging out on Take Command.